Sense of what Brexiteers make of today's announcement from the EU, I've been speaking to Jacob Rees-Mogg, Conservative MP and chair of the European Research Group.
Well, it's their opening negotiating position, and we should negotiate back because there are elements of it that I think are really very difficult for the government to accept.
Such as?
The free movement has to continue, and that the date for applying the rights of citizens will be the date of the end of the transition period rather than the 29th of March 2019, that we will be subject to the European Court of Justice, and perhaps the biggest risk is the ability of the EU to make new laws in the interim period.
But Michel Barnier in the press conference this afternoon was very clear that the four pillars must remain in place and there can be no a la carte version of membership as such.
Well, the whole point is that we're no longer members, and therefore we're not having the a la carte or the table to hot or whatever it is. We are leaving.
We are leaving, but he seemed to be very clear that the transition period itself was a privilege. That was the message he seemed to be giving. It was something the EU was allowing for everyone to smooth over the wrinkles that may come in the path of us leaving, and therefore it was their terms or no terms. That seemed to be very much the tone of his press conference.
Well, they want to get things ready from their own side as well. Bear in mind, we buy about £100 billion more of goods from them than they buy from us. And that this will be the first time since the Norman conquest that the UK has accepted rules imposed by a foreign power without having any say over them. That's a really big constitutional issue.
Downing Street today said there would naturally be differences between the sides, acknowledging some of the points that you've made ahead of the main negotiations. Are you satisfied by that as a response for now?
There are two key challenges for Downing Street. One is to set out what they want at the end of the transition. A transition to nowhere or to some unspecified destination is a plank rather than a bridge. That if we're not clear on where we're going, then we're not transitioning to anything. And that gap needs to be filled, and it needs to be filled as a matter of priority. And the second is we need to have clarity on the date of when transition ends. The EU has set a date of the 31st of December 2020, which is a very sensible date in my view. The government's talking vaguely about 2 years. The government now needs to set out what it wants and when it wants it. The truth is that to govern is to choose, and the government has to make choices. And inevitably, in making those choices, it will find some people aren't in favour of every choice that it makes.
On his Facebook page, the journalist Robert Peston said that Angela Merkel had journalists laughing uproariously about Theresa May and the way in which the Brexit negotiations are being conducted at a Davos briefing last week. Is there a danger that the government's becoming a laughingstock on Brexit with its inability, as you seem to be suggesting, to decide on what it wants at the end of all of this?
Well, I think this is quite historic. If a German chancellor has cracked a joke, I don't think that's ever happened before. The German sense of humour isn't so well known, I don't think.
Let's take that as a given, shall we?
What? The Germans have suddenly developed a sense of humour. Well, I congratulate them. They're becoming a bit more British, and that's a jolly good thing. No, I don't think that's right. Mrs. Merkel, perhaps she should look at her own position. Does she have a government yet? There might be a little bit to laugh about at her own position.
One last thought then about the Lords. The EU withdrawal bill heads to the Lords tomorrow. Some suggest that this is the most pro-EU Europhile bit of the House of Commons. What do you think that could mean for the Brexit process? Could it be held up further?
I think the leader of the Labour peers in the House of Lords, Baroness Smith, is a very sensible person. There are some other peers, Lord Adonis particularly, who want to tear up all the conventions. That would be a great risk and damaging to the House of Lords. But I think there are more sensible peers who will probably decide that the job of the Lords is to improve and revise, and that is probably...
We will make America great again.